Howdy folks, Dave here at Thunder Mesa Studio, where this week I'm adding some animation to the On18 Bandit Canyon Railway. And it's going to be in the form of a balancing rock, which teeter-totters back and forth above the track as the trains pass by. Animated balancing rocks were of course a notable feature of the old mine train through nature's wonderland attraction at Disneyland. And those of us who are old enough to remember it, like I am, look back on that scene pretty fondly. You would go through what was called Balancing Rock Canyon, and the rocks would teeter back and forth and look like they were going to fall and collapse down on you as the train went by. Now, just about every time I have somebody over to the studio to look at the Thunder Mesa layout, they always ask if this rock right here, this is ambush rock, they ask if this one animates, and I'm afraid no, it does not. I do have a section of animated balancing rocks that I'm planning for the Thunder Mesa layout, but those are going to be done sometime in the future. They're going to use a different method than what I'm going to be using today to animate the teeter-totter rock on the Bandit Canyon Railway. Over here at the workbench, you can see what I have in mind here with this drawing. How this is going to work is basically there's going to be this mechanism hidden inside some carved foam rocks. You've got a mast here and an arm that comes out like so and a little pivot. And then going down to a 3 RPM DC motor, we've got a piece of music wire on a cam. And as the cam rotates, it moves that wire up and down, which causes the arm to move up and down and pivot and makes it look like the rock is teetering. Pretty basic. So the first thing I want to make is this mast and pivoting arm mechanism, and I've already laser cut a piece for the arm to give us a little head start. Taking some measurements over on the layout, I've determined that I want this mast to be about 3.5 inches tall, and I'm going to use some 6x12 to make that. So I just need to cut a couple of pieces. The first one will be the full 3.5 inch height. And then I'll do a second piece, which is going to be about 3/8 of an inch shorter. People are always asking me where I get this nifty little miter box and saw from. You can pick these up on at micromark.com. Now I want to glue these two pieces together. With that 3/8 of an inch reveal sticking out on one end. Alright, with the glue dry, now I can take this on over to the disc sander and square this off nice and even on the end. I also rounded off this top edge here too. Not really important for the mechanism to work, but it should make it a little bit easier to hide inside the rockwork. Now I need to mark and drill a hole for my pivot. Here's a closer look at the animation arm that I laser cut. And I actually went ahead and made 2 of these, because my rule is if I need one part like this, make 2. And if I need 2, make 4. So you've got the pivot hole right here, and then you have another hole right there to receive the music wire. Now that's not going to allow for a whole lot of motion, really. Well, it kind of depends on the size of the cam on the motor, but I really don't want a big motion on this. It's something that should move very slowly and very subtly, you know. You don't want a big flapping motion. That would kind of spoil the whole trick. So just kind of slow, little bit of motion like that. Now I want to mix up just a little bit of 5-minute epoxy, because I'm going to cement a length of phosphor bronze wire into this hole right here. This stuff's about 1 millimeter in diameter. And it's only going to be cemented into this side. Of course, for it to act as a pivot, it needs to turn freely inside the hole in the arm there. Not really sure why they call it 5-minute epoxy, because it sure isn't dry in 5 minutes. Usually 10 or 15. Kind of reminds me of when I was young. I used to work in one of those 1-hour photo labs. And when they were setting up the whole machine and walking us through it, you know, the employees, I asked them, so are the photos really done in an hour? What if you get a whole bunch of orders at once? I don't see how they could all be done in an hour. And the company man, the corporate guy, said, well, 1-hour photo is just a brand name. It's not a guarantee of service. And I said, well, you want to stand here and explain that to the people all day long? I didn't last very long in that job. All right, that's dry. Put the arm on here. Trim that off. Now, to keep this from slipping off the end of the wire, I've just got a tiny little piece of heat shrink just to cap it off. So there is the mast and arm assembly. Now I need to make a little base for it so it'll stand upright. And for my stand, I've just got 3 pieces of 1/4-inch stock. I'll just glue those up. Like so. Clamp that with my fingers for a minute or two. And then I can put my mast right in the middle, like that. Where I want to put this thing is right about here. Right there. And I've decided that I'm going to deviate from my drawing a little bit. I'm not going to have the motor up here inside the rockwork. Decided it'd be a lot better to have it down here underneath the layout deck. So I need to mark this so I can drill a hole. I think a 1/4-inch hole will probably be plenty big enough. Oops, sorry, Mongo. Mark that position so I get it back in the same spot every time. So this is some 20 thou music wire, a little more than 1/2 millimeter in diameter, and this is what we're going to use to actuate the arm. I want to put like a U bend in this end. Bend it once, an L shape, and then bend it again. I'll thread this through here. And just squeeze this tight. All right, that works. Now I need to make a bracket to mount the motor underneath this deck. First, I think we'll carve some rocks. Now I've got some chunks of polyurethane carving foam, sometimes called gold foam. This is a pretty medium density. I like it a little bit more dense than this, but that's become hard to find, at least in retail. You can pick this stuff up on Amazon and Dick Blick Art Materials, places like that. I think I'm going to use this piece to make the actual teeter-totter rock. Obviously it's much bigger than I'm going to need. The first thing I want to do is cut a slot in here to receive that arm. Now this stuff does make quite a mess, so I really recommend any tools, materials that you're not using at the moment on your workbench, put those away, because everything is going to get covered with some very fine urethane dust. That almost works. There we go. That's a start. Nice fit. Now I just need to carve away all the parts of this that don't look like a rock. Well, I don't think there's any reason I can't go ahead and just glue this mechanism into the rock now. That'll make it easier to make sure everything has a uniform paint job on it. Oop, a little too much glue right there. Okay. So far, so good. Now I can carve the base. Is that all right with you? Yeah, that's okay with me. Now for the rock base or pedestal, I cut the basic shape out on my bandsaw. Now, once again, I just need to carve everything away that doesn't look like a rock. If you do rock carving like I do, carving by hand, it really helps a lot to be familiar with the kind of rock that you're carving. Fortunately, I live in the area where there's a lot of sandstone buttes and rock formations like this over in Sedona. But if you don't, there's all of Google. You can do some research online and find some good looking rock formations that you'd like to emulate. And you don't have to copy them exactly, just get the basic idea. Now that I have the general shape, I need to take it back over to the bandsaw and cut out this central portion to accommodate the mast inside. Now I need to cut out around here on the bottom to make an allowance for the base of the mechanism. To do this carefully, I should get a nice tight fit on there. And up here on the top, just want to round it off so my rock can teeter. It took about another 20 minutes or so of filing and shaping, but I think just about got it here. Let's see how this goes. That'll work. All right, that will work. Now we have the problem of how to hide this slot right here. That's actually solved pretty easily. Just take another piece of foam, cut it to size, and then we'll go right in there like that and be carved to match. And because the urethane foam is porous, you can use PVA glues on it. It'll take a little while to dry, but it does work. Right now I'm just using some yellow carpenter's glue. Now I just carve this down to where it meets the existing rock face. And go over it with my wire brush. Add some more strata lines. Blend that nicely together. Now I'm adding some broken bits of rock here around the top of the pedestal to better hide the pivot and the wire. And put those in place. I am using some cyanoacrylite because I want them to stay right where I put them. Just kick that with a little baking soda. All right. I think that's looking pretty good. I just need to clean all of this up and get some paint on this. Now, this is my scenic base color for the Bandit Canyon Railway. It's kind of a light raw sienna. And for those keeping track, it's actually exactly the same scenic base color that I used on Calico Mountain. The rocks on Bandit Canyon are a little different than they are on the Thunder Mesa layout. I was inspired here more by Bryce Canyon. I wanted Bryce Canyon-like hoodoos on Bandit Canyon, whereas on Thunder Mesa it's mostly inspired by Sedona and Moab, Utah. The rocks are very different looking up there, actually. So we'll get the scenic base coat on here, set that aside to dry, and then I can start work on the mount for the 3 RPM motor that's going to go underneath the layout deck. So this is a low geared DC motor, 3 RPM. Picked these up on, I think I got them on eBay. They're from China. Bought about a half a dozen of them because they're great for, you know, small animations on the layout. It runs on 9 to 12 volts, so should work great with the lighting bus that's already on the layout. And I'll go into the 9-volt bus and all that on a future episode. But right now, I need to build the mounting box so I can install this underneath the layout deck. Laser cut some parts for my motor mount out of some 1/16 of an inch thick MDF. Just making sure I get some glue on all these mating surfaces, and the tabs and slots help everything to line up. So the motor will fit right in there, and this gets screwed up underneath the layout deck. I also laser cut this cam, which will fit onto the shaft of the motor. You can see I put a hole way out here. That's actually a miscalculation. That hole is way too far out. That makes this cam, that would way too much motion for what I want. See, this is, you measure, that's like a full inch of travel for that wire as this thing rotates around. So it's going to go down and back up, and that's going to, you know, altogether that's a full inch. So you got to kind of multiply this distance by 2 to get the full travel. What I want is, you know, maybe a 1/4 of an inch of travel at the most. So I need to put a hole right down here, right next to the axle shaft. So really close in there to just get that just a little bit of subtle animation that I'm looking for. Got a couple little nuts and bolts to position this where I want it. Get in there. Now I can measure and mark where to drill these holes to mount it underneath the layout. I think I want to go ahead and glue this into place now, because that's going to take a minute to dry. And there's going to be a lot of upward pressure on this from that DC motor. Make sure it's good and secure in there. Using some Loctite power grab, which is good for gluing foam to itself and to other things like plywood. I almost forgot. I need to solder some leads on here before I install the motor. I'm using some 28 gauge solid core wire, which is what I like to use for all the hookups on lighting and accessories like this. Probably a really good idea to test this motor out before I install it too. There we go. Yeah, it's turning. Just want to screw this in at one corner first so I can pivot it out and adjust this wire to the right length. Okay. Now I think I can put the rest of the screws in. Really got a mongrel assortment of screws here. I don't think any two of them match, but you know, this is exactly the kind of thing I save old screws for, so might as well use them. I'm an idiot. You know why? Because this wire is going to be on the outside of the drive shaft. Otherwise, it won't turn. Oh, you gotta laugh. You know, you gotta laugh. Well, let's fix that. Unfortunately, music wire is fairly forgiving. You want to bend it back and forth too many times, though, or it will break. Now, if I can just get it through there again, everything will be copacetic. Whew. Well, I tested it out, and guess what? Doesn't work. The motor works fine. All the mechanical parts work. The problem is that it's too much motion. Even though I, brought it down to 1/4 of an inch, it's actually less than 1/4 of an inch. It needs to only be about 1/16 of an inch. So what happens is the music wire just pops out of the hole because it's too much tension on there. So now I have to figure out a different solution. All right, it took a minute, but I've come up with what I think is a solution. The problem I was having with that cam is that no matter how close I put that the hole to the shaft, it was too much travel, and that's because the diameter of the shaft is actually larger than the amount of travel that I need on this. But the interior of the shaft is just right. There's a hole here that you can, which is threaded, you can screw things into it. So my solution is to have the wire go directly into that hole and then fill half the hole. I've used some basswood here, and I've just potted it in with some CA. So that creates the cam just inside of that shaft, just enough travel to make this thing work. At least that's the theory. Now I'm going to test it out and see if it actually works. Fingers crossed. Oh, my friends, I love it when a plan comes together. If at first you don't succeed, you know the rest. I used some of the cutoff pieces from making our little rock formation here to create some more incidental rocks all around it, and I'll just get some paint on these. Then we can finish this up. And the next step is to put a dark wash on here. That soaks back into all the cracks and crevices. And this is just some black mixed with burnt umber acrylics. Probably about 60-40 towards the black. Alright, now let that dry. Now I'm ready to do the final painting on these. And I've just got a few acrylic colors here, some burnt sienna, some burnt umber, got my original scenic base coat, some unbleached titanium, and then the light scenic base, which I use in all the scenery in here, which is about a shade lighter than this is. So I'm going to start with that. And I'm using it's kind of a semi-stiff brush. Just going to go over the tops of all of these, bring out the details and the texture. And as always, this latex paint, this acrylic paint, is going to dry a shade or two, sometimes darker than it goes on. So you just have to plan for that. Since the rocks here are based on Bryce Canyon, they're actually a lot more red in them than I put on the Thunder Mesa layout. People think those rocks are really red, but they're actually not. Just mixing some burnt sienna in with that light tan. I'm trying to pay attention to where the layers are too. I've already done some rock work over there, so I'm trying to match where the colors are on those rocks as I do these. Now for highlights, I want to mix some of my unbleached titanium in with this light tan, not lighten it up a shade. I'm just gradually getting lighter and lighter as I go here, working my way up to the highlights. All right, I think we about got it. And there it is, the world famous Teetering Boulder of Bandit Canyon. Is it world famous? I don't know, maybe if enough people watch this video. I want to thank you all so much for watching today, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and hit that notification bell if you want to see more. And of course, you can always follow Thunder Mesa over on Instagram at thunder.mesa and see all that's new on the Thunder Mesa Studio website at thundermesa.studio. And if you really like what we're doing here at the channel and would like to show your support, you can do what these nice folks did and head on over to patreon.com/thundermesa and show your support there. Until next time, keep moving forward, everybody. Adios for now.